Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 357. I'm your host, Paul Rieckhoff. Halloween is just 1 week away, and this is definitely a season of scariness, of fright, of terrifying prospects. As Trump rips off half of the White House, sends troops into new cities like Portland and Chicago, ICE starts doing raids in New York City, Hegseth is authorizing strikes on what may or may not be Venezuelan narco boats, and the shutdown continues. There's also baseball happening, but who can pay attention to that when the world seems like it's on fire? But now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. And to help us stay vigilant, to help us navigate these dicey waters, and especially focus on the national security issues, which I believe are of the utmost importance and continue to get buried beneath all the other crap. Rejoining us is a returning champion, the intrepid reporter of the Washington Post, the great and powerful Dan Lamothe is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
I noticed that you are, I always ask everyone, where are you and how are you? I notice you are not at the Pentagon. So can you tell us where you are and why you're not at the Pentagon and how you're doing, Dan?
Yeah, you're catching me in my home office right now. That's largely in part because the Pentagon press corps, for the most part, turned in its badges last week, and very few outlets, basically no outlets asking critical questions, are left in the building.
Can you break this down for people who are laymen, who don't cover maybe politics, the news, or especially the Department of Defense? Explain what led to the point where I think it was last week, you all walked out en masse, right? You all walked out together, a very powerful statement, I think a very patriotic statement, a tremendous public service. This was conservative outlets, moderate outlets, liberal outlets, all together with the exception of a few, walked out and you haven't gone back. But can you talk us through what led up to that point and why it's so unprecedented?
Yeah, I mean, I think really to level set, we got to go back to the beginning of the year. Secretary Hegseth's confirmation process was, very contentious. Combed through his handling of a veterans group, but also sexual assault allegations, a lot of messiness in his personal life prior to President Trump appointing him to this position and not nominating him late last year. And by all accounts, a lot of reporting, including my own, would say that he took that pretty personally. He was quite frustrated by the way that his personal life was combed through. So he walked in seemingly pretty angry at the media, at the way that things get out, whether he wanted it to or not. And over the span of the last, at this point, we're going on about 10 months, we have seen him over time gradually reduce media access. That started by taking away the television booths of a handful of outlets, taking away the desk of the Washington Post, the New York Times, Politico, and others. That was cast at the time as a quote-unquote media rotation program. Even though, by all accounts, within the press corps, we all were kind of like taking all comers. It's a really diverse press corps, politically, ideology-wise, state media from other organizations, conservative outlets, liberal outlets. It kind of runs the gamut. So that was step one. We then saw them lock the briefing room, which then prevents CNN and some of the others from doing live hits in the briefing room, even though that had been customary for years for the outlets that didn't have television booths of their own. And then we saw the reduction of where the press could go in the building. And I think also notably the way that this has been described as the press kind of like having free reign of the building, that was never really the case. The press had access to the unclassified spaces in the building. The same spaces that you see tour groups go through, the same spaces that you see foreign military officers go through, janitors go through, employees going to CVS, Popeyes, the chocolate shop. Like, the Pentagon is a huge enterprise, and the press corps had access to the unclassified spaces. As you would expect, the classified spaces in the building are under lock and key, should be under lock and key, and were not places I've ever been. I've been in the building for years, more than, I guess pushing 18 years on this beat, and I have never been in the classified spaces in the Pentagon, nor would I anticipate that's customary.
And I want to take this a step further, too, and explain to people. You also used to have workspaces that you could leave from, and then you would go down to the briefing room, which was a Pentagon briefing room where, anyone can think about Pentagon spokespeople like Admiral Kirby and any number of people, right? Secretaries of Defense, as long as we can remember, would hold regular briefings, especially when there was breaking news. If there was a war, for example, they would provide updates. You think back to the daily or even hourly updates that were happening during the Gulf War, during the early stages of Iraq and Afghanistan. But there were weekly press briefings where they would put out information on, for example, the status of things during a shutdown, which is happening right now, and the American people need to know about. But also information like casualties. Like, Private Snuffy was killed in action in this training facility at this time. This is his name. This is his age. Like, basic accountability for the American people. So can you talk about how long that's been going on, and if there's any precedent for it in modern history for them just stop doing briefings entirely?
Yeah. So I guess going across 5 or 6 defense secretaries over numerous political administrations, I have seen regular briefings. The defense secretary briefs the media on occasion. Those are big news events, handful of times a year maybe. But his appointed people to spokesman jobs, press secretary, communications director, those sorts of roles, they typically brief on a weekly basis. Most commonly, I've seen it where there's one briefing on camera per week, one briefing off camera per week. That's commonly referred to as a gaggle. But that was kind of the battle rhythm. Every Tuesday, Thursday, every Monday, Thursday. It varied over time, but regular times to answer questions. And that's in addition to walking down to offices and, discussions on a phone and in a hallway and other things that were kind of all just part of the job. In this particular year, we have seen briefings like that rarely, and none since August at this point. It's just a different feel. There's seemingly no desire to have a good faith conversation about what the U.S. military is doing, what makes sense, what doesn't. Part of the job for us is to ask questions on the behalf of the American people. Hey, how is this going? What did you use? Did that go the way that you expected? None of that's happening, at least on camera, and very little of it behind the scenes either.
And even, I think, basic questions like have been asked in the past, like, who is the commander in charge of this unit, right? Who is the commander in charge of this operation? I remember them refusing to answer who was in charge of the Los Angeles deployment for a period of time. But they're also refusing the ride-alongs that used to happen, right? Or at least dramatically limiting them. I mean, I got to also, August. They haven't done one since August. I mean, think of all the shit that's happened since August and now, and they're not doing Pentagon press briefings. And I always remind people, Dan, that the people who also require this information are the family members of service members, right? When your kids are deployed, this is how you find out what's going on for them. So I think that's a really important public accountability piece that gets lost. But you've been on ride-alongs with the chairman of Joint Chiefs to NATO, to other forward deployed places. Many in the press have done that. Barbara Starr and others have been on this show before. But it seems like those are no longer happening or dramatically limited. And the folks who are going, instead of someone like you or CNN, now it's Laura Ingraham from Fox News that's doing a cheerleader tour. Can you talk about the limitations of that and how, in place of the Pentagon press briefings, they're just putting out content. they're like a content machine. I mean, to me, it looks like propaganda, but they're just putting out their own videos. They're putting out their own newsreels. They're putting it directly to social media, directly to the public, without any kind of oversight from the press whatsoever, circumventing all of you. I mean, they're just putting up doors all around you and trying to go straight to the American people without you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say as a starting point, the press briefings had been sort of the bare minimum. And you've long seen tension between administrations and journalists over whether questions were getting answered in detail, and in practicality at these briefings. So, like I think it's also worth noting that that's also not always been the be-all, end-all. But it's a bare minimum is probably a fair way to put it. The secretary typically customarily will travel with a press corps on the plane as he's traveling the world. I've seen as few as 3. I've seen as many as a dozen kind of hop on the plane with him and go to places like the Middle East, NATO, Asia. I've done these trips. I mean, especially the longer ones, they can be quite grueling. You're talking 6, 8, 10 time zones in the span of a week. You spend a day in Mongolia, you spend a day in Korea, you spend a day in Hawaii, and you're kind of making those hops across time zones with the secretary and his team. And those trips typically have intention to them. They're trying to demonstrate certain things. They're trying to have certain discussions. They're trying to check boxes with their counterparts overseas. And those are important trips. In this case, Secretary Hegseth is sometimes making those trips with absolutely no press aboard. On other occasions, he's taking a small press pool, maybe a camera that is then transmitting back to the other television outlets, commonly known as a TV pool, but far fewer outlets with him. And then he's also frequently taking very partisan outlets with him, people that very much, I think, are in line with his thinking. Laura Ingraham made the trip to Guantanamo. One of the things that I reported as a scoop out of the early trip to NATO, which I shadowed flying separately, but did not accompany the secretary, is that they had invited Jack Posobiec, who's a far right sort of media, sort of activist, not someone you would customarily see on the defense secretary's plane.
They've opened access to the Alex Joneses of the world and the Laura Loomers of the world, and you all have been sidelined. Can I ask you to talk about something that I think is also deeper? And I think this is all on strategy, right? I think what they're doing at the Pentagon is being reflected at Department of Veterans Affairs. It'll be reflected at DHS. They're starting at the Pentagon, and they're going to replicate this in other places. And you all are one of the most important press corps, so they want to kind of break you guys first. But they're doing something else, Dan. They're questioning your integrity constantly, like individually and collectively. They make it sound like you guys are these nefarious mice that are crawling all over the building, sneaking into classified areas. I mean, you can't kick the door in and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and stick a microphone in his face. That's not how it works. But they know that people don't understand how it works. And I think they're really doing... they're focusing consistently on trying to discredit you, diminish you, attack your integrity, and punching at you on Twitter all the time. And mostly Twitter is what I see. But all of you, so many of you in the White House press corps, it's like an open battle between Sean Parnell and other Pentagon spokespeople and you all essentially fighting about what the truth is, what really happened. Is there any precedent for that? And it seems like they're only going to escalate it.
We're in uncharted waters, particularly with the Pentagon press corps this year. I think during the first Trump administration, we saw some of this elsewhere in the administration. The Pentagon was somewhat shielded from the most partisan politics that we saw during the first Trump administration. Secretary Mattis, Secretary Esper, I think tried to model a sort of relatively nonpartisan senior leadership style. It didn't always work. It probably didn't go as well as they would have liked and as the American people would have liked on everything. But I think there was at least an effort. This is a different ballgame, and it has been really since the beginning of the year. I'm fine with getting called whatever people want to call me. That's fine. I mean, some of that's out there and open on on X, on Blue Sky, on other platforms. But on the facts, when I will dispute you on the facts. If you're going to flatly misstate things, the way it's gone, the way it works, the reporting process that we put in, yes, we will dispute that. So there have been numerous cases this year, more than I've ever had to do before, where I will take a statement from senior Pentagon officials and say that's false or that's a falsehood. Here's why, and you're just going to have to do that. I mean, that's part of the job now too.
Let's talk about specific incidents that I don't think are getting enough attention. They're now clicking into a new phase of what I would consider unprecedented over-messaging, extreme partisanship, where they're talking about, their political opposition in front of military groups. It's not a glitch anymore. It looks to be a strategy. Vance did it this weekend in his speech to the Marines on their anniversary. Hegseth did it in his speech. Trump does it pretty often. But they're also doing some crazy shit. I mean, during this Marine Corps recognition, they fired live artillery over a California highway. There's some reporting that there was shrapnel that hit vehicles on the highway. This is the sort of stuff that's not getting, I think, enough transparency, enough coverage. They put on a great big show, and somebody fucked up or something fucked up, and they fired live ammunition over a highway. Can you talk about that story in particular, what you know about it, and also how it might be representative of this larger challenge America's facing in getting the truth?
Yeah, I mean, that's an incident that I think in some ways is kind of emblematic for the larger discussion. In this case, from my reporting, Marine Corps officials thought they could do this without problem, had checked all their safety boxes. This is the one specific kind of howitzer round that is approved for use over friendly forces. This is not a round they anticipated having any problems with. So they had that discussion. They actually had a dress rehearsal the day prior, which would have been Friday, where they launched numerous rounds over I-5 then. Governor Newsom shut down the highway Saturday. He did not shut down the highway Friday. That's another fair discussion I've had of you're shutting it down, but not both days. Why? There's an inconsistency there as well. But on Saturday, they launched, I believe, 6 rounds. They were planning to launch many more than that. On the 6th round, it was described to me as sort of you saw a puff of smoke overhead. Not anything like you saw with the other rounds. These rounds travel miles, so at high speed. So you're not going to necessarily see the full track of these things. But the one that stood out was the one that looked different, which malfunctioned seemingly for some reason. The Marine Corps' belief is that something went wrong with the fuse on that round. You have the actual shell, the explosive shell, and then a fuse, which comes with timing and technology on it that kind of indicates where it should detonate. We're waiting to see whether that's operator error or some sort of mechanical malfunction. But either way, this is something that they thought would go well. They thought they had checked all their boxes. Something weird happens, and then when you add the Trumpian politics on top of it, you have the freak out, and it puts the Marine Corps right in the middle of a political food fight.
Which I think is really important to underscore, right? I mean, every day it seems like our military is being dragged deeper into these political food fights. Now, I continue to highlight, what I think is a huge challenge for our defense forces and for our country is that they are sloppy, they are at times incompetent, and they're arrogant. The arrogance of firing live rounds over a highway at the opposition of the governor of that state is in my understanding the reality of what happened. Mistakes can happen, but this is why you don't fire live rounds over civilian highways, right? And there was no need for it. There was no enemy forces. It was all a giant show for not even public cameras, but for their cameras to get more content, to push this message, to look strong, to elevate Vance. Let me ask you, Dan, if I can, where's the accountability? anywhere. I mean, what happens now in this instance, the investigation into Hegseth signal use, which is another example of where we need more transparency. It doesn't seem like Congress is flexing its oversight responsibilities. And it feels like, frankly, the power of this administration and the Pentagon and Hegseth is broadening. And they're pushing away accountability. But where will accountability come from, if anywhere now, Dan, especially as they escalate operations with Venezuela? We could be at war with Venezuela by the time this podcast drops.
Yeah, something I would add on the Marine Corps thing, because I think this is kind of illustrative too. I have had discussions with folks who said, hey, the White House didn't tell us to launch these rounds over the highway. But it seems the Marine Corps thought that was a good plan anyway, that it was a safe plan, that they had checked all their boxes, that this was good. So I don't even know that we necessarily have the Trump White House here saying, you got to do this. But I think you're in a weird world now where everybody thinks this is going to go according to plan. When it doesn't, you end up with all of the dynamics. You have the governor who already had raised concerns. You have the White House saying, hey, we were told this is fine. So now you're kind of left with commanders having to sort through what happened and what they could have done differently. Another option would have been fire ceremonial cannons on the beach side, west of the highway, and then launch artillery on the east side, which is a training range, and you wouldn't have had that challenge. If they could do that again, I would anticipate that's probably what they would have done. But now it's all politicized as a result. Accountability-wise, looking forward, there's a number of open discussions that have not been resolved this year. Take this back to actually even prior to Trump taking office again, you had an American fighter jet shot down over the Red Sea, or at least that's the way it was described at the time. Pilot punched out, seeing incoming fire from an American destroyer. This is off the coast of Yemen in December. And then the more recent incidents in which you had two fighter jets, American fighter jets, that went off an aircraft carrier earlier this year under Trump's command. We've been waiting on that investigation now for months and months. I was told it was coming this summer. We haven't seen it yet. You also have the signal issue with the secretary putting operational details in an unclassified chat. That obviously freaked a lot of people out. That has led to questions from Congress. That has led to an inspector general review. That review we had all anticipated would be coming in September. It's October. I don't have that review yet. Neither does anyone else. That is another one. We're all waiting to see where that goes. And then you also had a discussion of these people that Secretary Hegseth fired in April from his own team. Some of his own friends declared that they were all leaking classified information and otherwise. I have seen no evidence that backs that. So we're kind of left in a world where we have numerous things, all sensitive, all thorny, all unresolved, and no public discussion of what actually happened beyond what came out at the time. They're seemingly pushing all of this back.
I want to come back to Hegseth and Trump versus governors in a second, but I also want to go all the way back to the press corps situation, this standoff we've got now. Where does this go, Dan? I mean, is this just normal now, and you guys are out until there's a new president? I mean, is there any recourse? Are there lawsuits? What can you all do? What can the American public do? What can Congress do? Or is it like so many other things, people are just kind of normalizing it, say, they're out, you guys could be out for the next 3 years, right? I mean, or how do you see it planning out? What happens next? Or what are the options?
Yeah, I mean, there have been open source discussions of whether or not a lawsuit will be filed and filed and by whom. I don't know where that goes, and that's really not my lane to decide. So I'm just kind of aware that could or could not happen, and I have to do my job one way or the other. Where we are at the moment is yes, the majority of the press, the good good faith press that not only covered Secretary Hegseth with some toughness, but also really dug into things like Secretary Lloyd Austin disappearing from the job for several days when he had a medical crisis and not telling anyone. You know, there is a, you know, like the scrutiny happens regardless who's in charge. We're in a spot now where we're out of the building. We're continuing to ask questions. We're continuing to probe. There are still people behind the scenes who are doing what they can to share what they can. But, you know, it is at least a challenge. And I think where it will especially be a challenge is when you have some sort of big crisis. There are times where in the past, the press has been able to assist the department in explaining what is happening quickly in a way that is both accurate, but also dials the temperature down on a crisis. Hey, we didn't shoot that round. Hey, the United States didn't do that, or the United States intended to do this and something else happened. You're working in a world where things can happen fast, and there is sometimes benefit to being able to communicate very quickly in ways that people believe you. And I think the challenge now is when you try to cut the press out and only communicate through your own channels that typically have some pretty partisan content in them, there's at least people who are going to say, I'm not sure if I buy this.
Oh, I mean, I think our enemies are celebrating all of this. I mean, if you had to get out information about a pandemic, for example, right? There are many times where the department has asked the press's help, understanding that our press has become bifurcated. People get their news from more isolated, siloed sources than ever before. And if they don't cooperate with you, if they don't share with you, then there are going to be communities that are just in the dark. Dan, I've continued to say that the most important story in America and maybe in the world is that Donald Trump can do anything he wants with the most powerful military in the world. He can strike Iran. He can hit boats off of Venezuela. He can deploy them into the streets. And I feel like the crossroads that we're meeting right now is Trump versus governors, where he says, I'm going to take the National Guard from one state and I'm going to send them to the other state. He keeps going to the courts. It's kind of become this political chew toy now. But I think ultimately, Trump is doing what he wants. He continues to activate National Guard troops. He continues to use Title X. He continues to send them to more places. ICE agents are now in New York. He may follow them up with National Guard troops. I can't imagine Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, would want that. Where does this go, Dan? I mean, I've had conversations with some of these governors myself, and I appreciate that they're suing and that they're in the press, but it doesn't look like they're stopping him. So is there anything that can stop Trump from doing whatever he wants with the military, especially stateside, in the next couple of weeks?
I mean, I think there's two things that are at play there. There's one is how do the courts handle this sort of thing, you know? And so we saw the deployment at least slow down for places like Portland, Chicago, and then the other thing is if something seems to at least bear further discussion and scrutiny before it happens, it's the press. It's bad headlines. It's headlines that draw attention. Those sorts of things that draw attention, things that actually explain things that wouldn't otherwise be in the daylight. The press at least has a role there. Can't stop it. Not my job. Not my job to decide whether or not something should or shouldn't happen. But it's my job to say, hey, that's newsworthy. That bears discussion by the American people. So things like. We had, you know, I had the scoop in I believe it was August. You know, you had the president say in the Oval Office, hey, maybe Chicago. I was already chasing this story at that time about whether or not Chicago would be the first city to see American troops after Los Angeles deployed, something akin to Los Angeles. Once he said that, it was a whole lot easier for me to confirm that there was a live discussion going back weeks that, you know, a planning discussion involving Pentagon officials and others that would have placed American troops in large numbers in Chicago. That obviously has been reshaped some since then. But that story triggered Governor Pritzker, triggered others in a way where they all started to push more openly for scrutiny of it, discussion of it, a sense for what actually was planned and wasn't. We saw that discussion kind of reshaped over time. The news coverage of it actually reshaped that discussion quite a bit.
We saw an unprecedented resignation of a four-star admiral who had, authority over Southern Command, where the Venezuelan strikes are happening. I think last week or the week before in the press, Governor Wes Moore floated the idea of illegal orders. He was the first governor I saw to say, maybe these orders are illegal. Some of these orders are illegal. This is the line that I think many of us who've served know needs to hold, but it's also the line that so many civilians don't understand, right? What is an unlawful order? Is there any discussion inside the Pentagon that you're aware of about kind of a breaking point? Is there an anticipated unlawful order that people are preparing for, that they will either oppose quietly or oppose publicly? Is striking Venezuela that line where we don't have any authority, we don't have any congressional approval? Now they're sending the folks that survived back, it looks like. But is there any sense of what's the line that Americans should look for, Dan, that we may be hitting in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, the discussion you're mentioning is Admiral Alvin Halsey, the commander of U.S. Southern Command, 4-star admiral. Someone that, by all accounts, in the discussions I've had with others, has a good head on his shoulders, has a lot of people who kind of respect him as a leader in this space. Even what the discussion of that is, I have heard from numerous officials, including people that are not particularly friendly to Secretary Hegseth, that this actually was not a resignation, but sort of Hegseth saying, you got to go. I have heard others say that Admiral Halsey actually offered his resignation during a tense meeting. I think they were just, they clearly didn't see this issue the same way. The Pentagon is denying that he resigned in protest. And we're kind of left with a murky situation, even now, 10 days, 2 weeks later, that the Pentagon has not cleaned up. There's no clarity on exactly what happened there. One way or the other, we're in a situation where there's increasing concern over what the plan is. There's increasing concern over how long this could go, how far this could go, whether this could expand to strikes in Venezuela proper. I think a ground invasion is unlikely, but there's at least people asking that question, and the Pentagon and President Trump aren't ruling that out either. Perhaps they see value in the strategic ambiguity of that. But it also comes with a lot of concerns and a lot of people that are saying, hey, man, we don't know what our government's doing on behalf of us. Mm-hmm. That's at least a discussion that they're going to have at some point.
Kind of an adjacent question. The big story in the political world this week, Dan, is the Democratic Senate candidate, Graham Platner in Maine, who is a Marine, also served in the Army, did multiple combat tours, is now facing a ton of controversy for a Nazi-related tattoo that he got in Croatia when he was drunk with his Marine friends. I think this is a really interesting insight into what's happening now, because it seems like it may be disqualifying for Platner. We'll see. The voters may have to ultimately decide. But Hegseth himself faced a similar controversy about a radically affiliated tattoo, or at least perceived tattoo, during his confirmation hearings. And I think, any of us could see, all right, we could understand how a guy might get drunk with his Marine Corps buddies and might get a stupid tattoo when he's younger. The question is, how do you not deal with that before you're running for Senate or before you're becoming nominated for Secretary of Defense? It looks like today Platner redid the tattoo in response to this. He said he didn't know. Can you talk about maybe just the broader issue of how accepted stuff has become that wasn't accepted before? I mean, I don't think Hegseth would have gotten through in any normal times for any number of reasons, that tattoo being one of many. But is there a feeling in the Pentagon, based off your reporting, that standards are being lowered, that people don't have to care about things they used to have to care about? Because if Hegseth can do it, if Hegseth can have multiple marriages and controversial tattoos and a checkered past, that it's okay for everybody.
Yeah, for me, that discussion of the tattoos the secretary had or has, they reframe that as a discussion over the cross tattoo that he has. The actual scrutiny was mostly on the other tattoo he had, which said Deuce Volt, which had more far-right affiliations to it. They tended to say, hey, people are freaking out about this cross tattoo. That really actually wasn't the initial discussion. It's the way they reframed the discussion. I think that's worth noting, first of all. I don't know where this goes for Graham Platner or others. And I think there is room, just as a citizen to say, hey, I didn't know, or I did, and at least let people have the discussion of like, okay, I was misinformed. I didn't, and then watch how they clean it up. And then it's not for the journalists to decide. It's mostly for the voters to decide. But I do think.
But you're not supposed to have Nazi tattoos and be allowed in the military, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but is there not a policy that forbids hateful or radical tattoos? If you're a recruit and you walk in and you have a swastika on your chest, generally you are not allowed in, correct?
Yeah, and I think really where we end up is a swastika is pretty easy to point out. A tattoo that says Latin Kings on it is pretty easy to figure out. Some of the tattoos that are more ambiguous or have dual meanings or have meanings that people may not understand or miss, including the people who get the tattoos. I do think there are people out there that said, hey, that looked kind of cool, and they got it. I don't know if Graham Platner is one of those or not. I don't know what's in his heart. But I think how they clean that up afterward, how they explain it, how they make sense of it, how they handle it, like that all becomes a part of the discussion, right?
I think for a lot of folks who aren't tracking on this stuff every day, a lot of this is probably mind-blowing news for you, right? Not knowing about the Pentagon press corps situation, not knowing about the rounds in California, not knowing about the latest controversies that we're talking about here today. Dan, in this show, we always talk about not just what's happening now, but what's happening next. What's happening next that America is not tracking on? And I know you're probably holding on reporting that you're working on, even some of your recent reporting, or what should people look for next that is most alarming or maybe the highest priority for all Americans who don't necessarily follow defense issues every day?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that catch my eye. As the United States military, the Pentagon, the administration put increasing primacy on homeland issues, Southcom, Northcom, domestic military deployments, things of that sort. There is at least less emphasis, less focus, less strategic planning time being spent on what to do about China, what to do about Russia. Where should we engage with allies and partners and not? There is zero sum on some of this stuff, and there is at least a discussion to be had about, okay, if you're going to spend all this time and put all these destroyers off the coast of Venezuela, where else could they be instead? That's one thing that comes to mind. And then as the Pentagon is reshaping the national defense strategy, which a lot of admirals and generals had concerns about, that issue is still not resolved. That's because they have spent the last 5 years having a discussion of China being the thing that everybody needed to prepare for. If China is still on the list but no longer the top of the list, what did we lose there? I don't know what the answer is, but I know that's a question that I have. Mm-hmm. And like those are the sorts of things, like we can only do so many things at once. I would be the first one to tell you the last 20-something years didn't necessarily go the way they always could have. Mm-hmm. Those are points well taken. So there is at least a discussion to have about what to do instead and how to do it. But when you reshape and push dramatically in new directions quickly, you at least got to be wary of what's getting lost on the cutting room floor.
Mm-hmm. Last question, Dan, I'll let you go. What's the over-under on Hegseth here? I spoke to a Trump insider this week that said to me he thinks Trump's going to ride him out till the end of the year, and then he'll give him a full year and make a switch. Do you have any sense? There was a Washington Times story this week that said he's lost some of the generals, which is undoubtable. There must be some that have been lost. The question is how much. Is there any reporting on the shelf life of Hegseth, and also who might be next? Is it Army Secretary Driscoll? Is it Tom Cotton? Is it someone else? Is there any chatter either in the White House or in the Pentagon about who would replace Hegseth if he was removed?
Back in the spring when Signalgate first happened, I think there was a real live discussion of how long he would last. The president made the decision to keep him on. He didn't want to move on. He likes Pete Hegseth personally. I think that's part of the discussion. I think he also just didn't want to be making cabinet level changes that quickly. as this has progressed, I think we've reached a spot where a lot of folks don't really know. I mean, if you told me he's in the job a year from now, that wouldn't surprise me either. I think we're in a spot where everybody is where they are. No one's really particularly moving on from that. I think it's kind of, I mean, I kind of see it as a status quo sort of situation that could last for a good while. I don't know that he's necessarily gone anytime soon. I think that's a choice for him. I think that's a choice for the president. Right now, no one seems to be moving on fast.
And it feels like they don't want to break the seal, right? Because it would set a precedent that they want to keep this initial crew together and keep their momentum. Any reporting or idea on who would be a possible replacement? Who's in Trump's good graces or has been even groomed to replace Hegseth if he were to leave?
Driscoll's name has come up, at least in conversations. I think Driscoll is seen as someone who's sharp, trying to reshape the army. He's also, done some things that have rubbed people the wrong way politically. But he's not a screamer. He's not probably Pete Hegseth's public persona. He's going to dial down the temperature a bit. But if you told me that he doesn't get the job for those reasons as well, that also wouldn't surprise me. I think we're looking at a lot of the same cast of characters. And including the possibility that somebody would get shuffled around from another cabinet post. So, TBD.
All right, man. I want to also just recognize that you are a really straight shooter. You're a reporter with great integrity and honor. I ask you some hard questions, and you always hold the line and maintain your journalistic integrity. And I will just say, as someone who's known you and watched your reporting for a long time, I think you're one of the finest out there. And they are revealing themselves in their attacks on you and so many others in the press corps, because I think there is no finer group of public servants and patriots, in my view, than the Pentagon press corps. So you have my support. I think you should know you have most of America's support, especially the educated part of America who understands the important line that you hold. Thank you for continuing to do that. It's a tremendous public service, especially in times like this. And thank you for coming to spend some time with us. Keep up the important work, man, and we'll be rooting for you.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Everybody, Dan Lamothe, please follow him on all social media. Be sure to get the truth of what's happening around our military through him. And if I were you, I would not trust the Pentagon without him and other folks shaping it. Go to independentamericans.us. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button now, and please share it. Help us continue to speak truth to power, add light to contrast to heat. Wherever you are, know that you are not alone in your independence. We're all independent. We're all in this together. Until next time, stay vigilant, America.
Powered by Righteous Media.